Since the movie Dances with Wolves came out, I have watched both the movie and the reactions in the Native community to the movie, which have shifted and changed a bit over time. For myself, I remember back in the 1990s when that thing came out. It was so dang exciting to see a film that had Native people, where some of the Native people were major characters, where it was a little more sympathetic to the mistreatment of Native people, in the 1800s, that actually had a little bit of humor and was a major high budget motion picture. All of that was super exciting. But then when I watched the film, and as I've had a chance to think about it more in the decades since then, I kind of have a mixed reaction. So I can still see and acknowledge the positive impacts that the movies had. Honestly, in 1985, there were a little over 80 Native people in the Screen Actors Guild. After the film came out, within a year or so, there were over 430 Native people in the Screen Actors Guild. I think that was really positive. Today, that number has grown, exponentially. All really positive things, not all attributed to that movie. But some of the things that bothered me about it are significant too. Ultimately, although it did have a more sympathetic treatment of Native people, they still positioned a white guy, played by Kevin Costner, as better at being Native than the natives. Better at riding a horse, better at shooting a buffalo, all of which, in addition to being historically inaccurate and kind of silly, also just kind of makes the white guy big and the Native people a little smaller. Also, there was some stereotyping in there where in the film, the Lakota were the good natives and the Pawnee were the bad natives. And it really did kind of portray the tribal affiliation as either positive or negative, when I think honestly all of us as human beings are kind of complex and we have both positive and negative things, and casting the Pawnee in such an unfavorable light didn't really land well. Recently, I was asked to read the book, Dances with Wolves. And as I did, Michael Blake, who authored it, really authored it thinking about how he could develop a screenplay that could eventually be made into a movie. And it was Kevin Costner who asked him to really develop it into a novel. So he did, and I had a chance to read the book. They actually asked me to write an introduction for it, which eventually I agreed to do. But I had to say, honestly, with the writing in the book, it reads more like a screenplay than a book. So there's lots of texturing to the, scene that's being set, but there isn't as much backstory or description or character development or word choices that one would more typically see in a novel. So it felt weird in terms of reading it. And of course, the book itself and the original screenplay that was being developed actually didn't focus on the Lakota at all, but focused on the Comanche. So there were some changes made as they actually developed the film. And all of that, honestly, the original writing for the screenplay and the book, I think did even worse than the movie in terms of the stereotypes about good and bad natives and, the way they treated each other and kind of sensationalized violence, and the white guy who was better than anyone at being Native. So those problems persisted, I think, even more strongly in the writing. Although I did an introduction, I kind of spoke to what I'm saying in this video about the positive contributions, of the creative work, but also the very serious problems and flaws in it. I think above all, though, we can look at the novel and we can look at the screenplay and we can look at the movie as inflection points in the portrayal of Native people in cinema. Since then, and especially in recent years, we have seen a lot more Native content creators who are stepping into that space, and we are representing ourselves not just as actors, but as the people writing the books and writing the screenplays. And I'm really hopeful that we'll look back in future generations, we'll look back at something like Dances with Wolves as a stepping stone in a longer journey to go from the imagined native to the native who is deeply understood in all its complexity and nuance. Miigwech.